Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Oscar-winning special effects wizard Phil Tippett is directing a new movie called Mad God. I spoke with the Oscar winner about his groundbreaking career from Star Wars to Jurassic Park. Hey, Phil Tippett, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking to me, Jason.
I'd say the majority of the time we talk to, directors, actors, but I feel like it's rare we get to talk to these master craftsmen, special effect technicians. I guess we talked with Douglas Trumbull a couple years ago, but this is a real treat because you've done it all, my friend. It's called Mad God, your new animated feature. Didn't you start this as like a stop motion film decades ago and had to shelf it for another major project we all know? Explain to our listeners how that happened.
I started after Robocop 2 and shot about 3 minutes of material, but realized that the scope and scale of the thing was too big. And so, we were doing other gigs, before Jurassic Park came around. Paul Verhoeven and John Davis and I were developing an idea for a dinosaur feature that would all be done in stop motion for Disney, but that whole thing fell apart. So, there was like other work going on, but then, Jurassic Park came up and kind of changed everything.
Well, yeah, we can get back to Jurassic Park later, but I want to focus on Mad God right now. Tell us about the basic premise of, the story.
First of all, there's no story. There is a narrative and there is a logic to it, but it really flies in the face of conventions about narrative filmmaking. So, and it's like a collage, it's a bunch of different techniques, from stop motion animation to, computer graphic comping to high speed miniatures and a high speed character that we called the Alchemist that was all shot at about 120 frames a second and composited into live action shots. So it was like, just figuring out it one bit at a time. And one of the first scenes we shot was the operation where they're kind of excavating the assassin's guts and pull out ton books and jewelry and false teeth and then some weird little dead creatures, and then pulls out a kind of a wormy thing that cries like a baby and dumps that into a tray, and the nurse takes it out and goes down the hallways to a big metal door that opens, and the alchemist comes out and takes the baby away. So, these things were just kind of built like that. And, if I'm working on a day job, I could do a setup. And if I'm on location, just walk away from the setup and, come back to it. I was very influenced by the surrealist artist, Joseph Cornell. He made these wonderful boxes, collages of materials he would find over the years. And he would go to junk shops and antique shops and just find stuff, and a lot of his stuff, he'd go back and it's very well organized, unlike me, and would have objects that he found in these boxes, and they may stay there for years until he's working on a project, and all the stuff that he doesn't know how to complete. All of a sudden, he goes like, the red parrot, the yellow parrots that I've been collecting, all different colors of parrots, that would go great in here. So he would do that. And my process was very, very similar. I just collect tons of junk. And, a lot of stuff made it into Mad God as a prop, or, I would just have, masks and, little artifacts from museums and scans of, prehistoric art And all that stuff kind of talks to you, you know. So I just surround myself with this and kind of soak up the vibe. So a lot of the, you know, so-called inspiration was just kind of like being in a steam room and soaking it up.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like it paid off, because I know it just premiered at the Locarno Film Festival in Switzerland. They also gave you the Vision Award there. How big of an honor was it for that? I assume that's sort of like a career achievement sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bigger deal than I had anticipated because nobody told me that when I got the award, it would be in the, well, I knew it was going to be in the Grand Piazza, but there were 6,000 people there. So that was daunting, you know. I had to think quick about how to be, you know, humorous and entertaining to 6,000 people.
I'm sure you pulled it off. Whenever I have someone, you know, a legend in filmmaking like yourself, I always want to know sort of how you got into it in the first place. So, you know, how did you fall in love with movie special effects? You know, growing up, where did you grow up, and how did you fall for special effects?
I grew up in the area I'm living right now, Berkeley, California, and then my parents moved to Southern California. But in 1955 or 6, when I was about 5 years old, I saw King Kong on television. In 1958, The Seven Floors of Sinbad. And those really galvanized you know, what my path was. I had no idea what the technique was. And if you watch the movie, you probably wouldn't be able to see it again for another 10 years or so on television. And this, you know, I've talked to my friends like Dennis Spearman, was really helpful for us, as opposed to the information overload that everybody's getting, you know, through the media and rapid access to things. You know, we would have to imagine, you know, and try and hold in our minds what we had seen. And that really led to you know, the building blocks of the creative process, you know, because you're just thinking and meditating on this stuff over and over and over. And so, you know, that's how we did it. I'm bipolar, and so I don't get pressed that often, but my manic side is my superpower. You know, I can just work and work and work and work and work and work, and until I drop dead. In fact, towards the end of the thing, my friends didn't tell me at the time, but then later they did. That I began to disintegrate, and I hated working on that god, and I just had to get behind the mule, plow the fields, and I presented it. And very towards the end, about a year and a half, you know, from completion, I had a mental breakdown. I had to go to the psych ward. It took me about 2 months to recover from that, but I went down this really dark path and became, you know, a victim of my own movie. And it's similar to an experience that Carl Jung had. He worked on a book called The Bread Book for 16 years, and it's beautifully illustrated and written and calligraphy. It's just a gorgeous book. And after 16 years of working on that, he found himself lost in his own world. And unfortunately, his family was able to pull him out of it. And yeah, it just all kind of came together.
Well, thank you for being so open about all of that. And I'm glad that, you know, like you said, you can take advantage of the manic side and crank out a lot of work and find some positive out of it, for sure. Thank you for that. Well, my listeners will kill me if I don't at least ask you one question about, you know, the ILM days, Industrial Light and Magic, all those breakthrough effects with George Lucas's Star Wars. Memories of like, how did you even meet Lucas and get hired, and like what actual effects were you? I know it was the little mini chessboard scene, but what else did you do in Star Wars?
Well, this was right at the very end of the schedule, and George wasn't happy with the cantina scene that he shot. he thought all the creatures kind of looked like Beatrix Potter creatures. So he was able to talk Fox out of some money to have a bunch of costumes made. And we went down, and so he hired Rick Baker, our friend, and Rick hired 4 out-of-work stop motion animators. And over the period of about 6 weeks, the direction from George was make as many space aliens as you can. And so we did that, went down to a little insert stage on La Brea Avenue in Hollywood, and George directed. We put the costumes on and acted in the costumes that we had made. And Carol Ballard was the director of photography. And so we went down and shot it. And while we were working on it, George would stop by once a week to check our progress. And he saw stop motion puppets that I had made as a teenager, and that gave me the idea to do the chess set.
Awesome. Well, I know you won like a special Oscar for that, at least for Jedi. Continue to do The Mandalorian, all kinds of stuff. So Star Wars has always been employing you, which is really cool. And then you mentioned RoboCop earlier, but final question we have to ask about Jurassic Park '93 won an Oscar for it was sort of that cross section of your bread and butter, your stop motion, your go motion dino puppets, but then this new technique of CGI dinosaurs roars onto the scene. And, talk about how you juggled those two, and Spielberg, just like King Kong generation before. I mean, Jurassic Park was that big moment where special effects took a hard pivot in a whole new direction.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm friends with Dennis Muren, and Dennis had kept me involved. Sometimes he would call me over to ILM to look at, some of the first computer graphic stuff they were doing, like the stained glass man in Young Sherlock and the water snakey thing in the Abyss. And so I was aware of the progress of it, but thought that computer graphics were, only going to be used for, more kind of hallucinogenic effects that you couldn't get with stop motion. But, one thing led to the next. And, some of the guys at ILM proved that they could make a dinosaur that looked, real. And Stephen just decided to go that way. And I reacted I was over emotional and got really sick with pneumonia and really depressed. I thought that's the end of it. I'd stay in bed for 2 weeks. But Dennis and my partner Jules, who's the CEO of our company, and my partner Craig Hayes at the time came up with the idea of doing this input device. And Dennis just didn't have the confidence in the animators that he had for Jurassic Park. They were all from Canada. They'd been all from Sheridan College, and they'd been trained with kind of classical Disney animation of squash and stretch and all that kind of stuff, and flying logos, but they weren't prepared to, do a reconstruction of an animal, behaving. And so I knew all that stuff, which is why I, got hired and they kept me on, because I knew more than anybody about dinosaurs, and it was very helpful in developing the script with, suggesting alternative dinosaurs that look more interesting, behave more interesting. And so I was helpful with, for David Koepp and Steven Spielberg doing that. And we designed the movie with Stan Winston and his team. And so my crew did the Tyrannosaurus paddock and the Raptor kitchen with these input devices that were essentially stop motion animation armatures with the encoders on them. And so the traditional stop motion guys who knew about weight and mass and performance could get it through stop motion. And that's how we did that stuff. It was very convoluted, very elaborate. But once we had created a performance, and then it was like in wireframes because the computers moved very slowly. They'd send that over to ILM, and they would render it. You could possibly get the shots.
Well, sir, it all paid off because your T-Rex paddock and the Raptor kitchen are two of the scariest scenes that I think I've still ever seen. So, man, what a career. We could talk all day, but I know you got to run. So thank you so much. Again, everyone, this is Phil Tippett. Everyone go check out his new animated feature, Mad God. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.